Hello everyone, this is Ponder on Weather. In this update, we've got a very unique pattern really setting up, so we'll break things down for you so you can plan ahead and stay well ahead of the storm. So let's take a look at the overall big picture, and you can actually see these blocking ridges of high pressure up here into portions of Greenland, as well as over the Aleutian Islands. That locks the cold air underneath as we have a very conveyor belt from coast to coast troughs really going to be setting up, and that's going to create a stormy pattern and keeping the colder air locked into place for an extended period of time. So what's happening right now with the temperatures is all that colder air is really locked up and well into Canada. We're talking 20 and 30 degrees, well below zero. We're still in the warm sector, a good chunk of the south and to the southeast, and that's going to set the stage for, unfortunately, some severe weather, and possibly a severe weather outbreak could unfold on Tuesday heading into Wednesday. But we got multiple troughs coming in off the west coast out ahead of it. That's going to keep the instability alive and well in a good chunk out west, and that's the system that's going to be swinging across from coast to coast throughout the week, bringing all these weather impacts in the week ahead. So if you're new to the channel and like detailed weather breakdowns on North America, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. You get all my daily content, as well as when I go live, which will be on Tuesday when this severe weather outbreak will unfold. And it's also important to hit the like button as well. It definitely helps out more than you know. So let's take a look at the overall drought index. Here's the latest update from the U.S. drought as of December the 6th, and we still need a lot of areas that are well into drought range. If not 78% of the country are seeing still abnormally dry conditions, especially out into California. All these areas out in red and the darker reds here, that you're talking exceptional, if not extreme drought in those areas. So any rain is definitely welcome, especially out west in the midsection of the country. There's pockets of that severe and exceptional drought. So let's take a look at where the precipitation is going to be falling over the water vapor imagery. So because we're going to have a very active subtropical jet that's going to be coming across, pulling in all that Pacific moisture and dumping it over the midsection of the country. So that's going to keep them kind of very volatile and active. At the same time, we've got multiple troughs coming in off the west coast. That's also going to bring more unsettled weather out west, and those are the systems that are going to be moving across from west to east, coast to coast throughout the week. That's going to bring all that inclement weather. So over the next 3 days, here's your precipitation. So you're going to have that active subtropical jet in the midsection of the country, bringing more rain into parts of Texas, into Oklahoma, back into Missouri, a good chunk of Arkansas, into Louisiana, swinging across into the southeast. We'll have also pockets of instability up here into the upper Great Lakes, as well as in portions of the mid-Atlantic. But yeah, for the next 3 days, we're talking some very healthy, decent rains for a good part of California and the Intermountain West. If you actually kind of zoom in and take a look at some of these rain amounts over the next 3 days, yeah, from now until Monday, about an inch of rain into portions of San Diego and Oceanside, as well as into Riverside. 1.6 inches for Los Angeles. This is definitely a welcome sign to see. All the way up into San Diego, San Jose doesn't get left out in the action either. They've got about an inch and a half. So if we even zoom further north into Northern California, yeah, some of these areas into San Francisco, 1.4 inches, back into Fort Bragg, over 3 inches of rain, Eureka, 3 inches. So definitely some welcome, healthy rains. And let's talk about the snow, because there's going to be plenty of it as well with those multiple troughs coming in. Look at the snow. We're talking measured in feet. With the extreme conditions setting up in the Sierra Nevadas, plenty of blowing and drifting, blinding snow for those areas. So the ski lovers are going to be loving it. I mean, look at the chart in the bottom corner of the screen. Yeah, some of these areas could easily pick up 18, 24 inches. This is just over the next 3 days, but on the northern side of this, we are going to have a little system that's going to be coming across the upper Great Lakes through the upper Midwest here and to the mid-Atlantic with some good sporadic 2 to 6 inches of snowfall in some of these areas, and that's just the initial stages of the snowfall. We could have our first flakes of the season in portions of New York City, but further to the north and Massachusetts and Connecticut, but especially northern portions of Pennsylvania and upstate New York, is going to be picking up some decent snows. But there's plenty. If you get left out with this storm, you got plenty more on the table with this next system. But first of all, further south, we've got a powerful jet stream going to be coming across. That's going to be digging down that colder air aloft. And as this swings across, we're talking a massive 105 jet stream, 105 knot jet stream coming across, tapping into this warm sector. That definitely spells trouble, because this air mass is ready to go, and all it takes is some sort of lift mechanisms, and you're going to get that in a big way. And unfortunately, if you take a look at the 850 millibar winds, they're going to be screaming at 60 and 70 knots at some of the lower levels. That spells trouble. That's talking about significant updraft potential. So that includes a larger hail potential. You obviously have that damaging wind, but unfortunately with that low level shear in place, the atmosphere is going to be rotating, and you could be looking at more tornadoes really starting to break out into East Texas, into the Arklatex, back into Louisiana, and this will shift off into portions of Mississippi. There's the 850 low well to the north, and northwest of that, it's going to be screaming with blinding snow going to be breaking out on Tuesday, heading into Wednesday. There's some of the dew points that's going to be tapping into this warm sector. I think things get going into the morning time frame in and around North Texas, but really get activated going into the afternoon, into the evening time frame on Tuesday in East Texas, into the Arklatex. Back behind it, those are your lower dew points. That's an indication of that Arctic air mass is going to be trailing behind this very strong cold front. So if you're ahead of this, you're going to be in the warm sector. But so you can look at the dew points lifting all the way. 55 is usually your crucial mark where you could be enough moisture to ring out thunderstorm development, and you're going to easily get that into portions of East Texas, into Arkansas, into portions of Louisiana. So I think it starts to initially unfold on Monday night, heading into Tuesday morning for portions of Oklahoma, along the Red River, in portions of North Texas. It looks to be more of a wind threat and more of a hail threat with that colder air aloft for those places. But once we get into Tuesday, that's when it transfers to all modes of severe weather, all hazards, including tornadoes. And right now we have a day 5 enhanced risk for severe storms. And fortunately, you remember the tornado outbreak that took place the 29th and the 30th of November. This looks to be a lot of similar type dynamics set up. And that particular setup, unfortunately, had 61 tornadoes reported with it. So this is another dangerous setup that could unfold on Tuesday heading into Wednesday afternoon. So let's break this thing down for you, because on Tuesday afternoon, this is, I think, things get activated. I think we're going to have a squall line coming through North Texas with some of that hail threat and the damaging wind threat going through Oklahoma, as well as in portions of Kansas here. But once you get to Nebraska, we're talking all snow just in the west and northwest of that low pressure center, and blowing and drifting snow as those tight isobars really start to congeal together. And some of these areas could start to experience whiteout, even blizzard-like conditions in these areas where these snows going to be ranging from 1, 2, can't even roll out 3 inches of snow in these bare clinic zones in a lot of these places, especially into South Dakota, getting into North Dakota, as this nasty squall line will be coming across. So I think things get going into the overnight hour on Tuesday with nocturnal tornadoes breaking out into portions of the Arklatex, into portions of Dixie Alley. So definitely concerned with that event. That will be going live on that setup to keep you as safe as possible. But to the north, it's going to be all snow with that Kamakyu swirl really starting to develop. And I think that's where we're going to be having some blizzard warnings in a good portions of Nebraska, especially into South Dakota, getting into North Dakota, as these tight isobars really start to tighten up, winds crank 50 upwards to 60 miles an hour with blinding snow. It's going to be very difficult to drive in those type conditions, as this will extend all the way up into Minnesota, getting into Wisconsin as we have that squall line coming across. So I don't think the tornado threat gets that far north. I think as far north as it gets is possibly western Tennessee, but once you get out further north into Kentucky, I think it's going to be just more of a damaging wind threat as this comes across, because it's going to have, you know, that low level moisture, and the dew points, I don't think they're going to be high enough. It won't reach that far north. So I think the really severe stuff is really going to be confined kind of well to the south. So here's an indication on Wednesday as it comes across, going back into portions of Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama. Like I mentioned, I think it reaches parts of Tennessee, but that's going to be the highest it goes, because mainly it's going to be a southern event. And that's where the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted that activity right in this bullseye here on Wednesday, for a slight risk for severe storms back into Louisiana, into southern portions of Mississippi, and into Alabama. I think once it gets to Georgia, again, it's just going to be a squall line type gusty wind type setup with some smaller hail associated with it along this squall line on Thursday as this rapidly moves across. And then where it's going to get cold enough, you got, warm air rises, cold air sinks, and then it could be snow, all in the form of ice. And this could be a fairly significant ice storm really starting to break out in parts of Pennsylvania. So definitely concerned about that heading into Thursday evening time frame, where it's all going to be wraparound snow then, because you're going to have a low pressure center really starting to lift up to the northeast, hanging off the coast of the northeast. And then you get all that colder air coming in from the northwest off that cross polar flow. And those going to be some fairly significant snowfall totals in a big way. But what's significant is what's trailing, and what's coming is the negative EPO, with that blocking that I showed you at the start of the video, all that places. And then it's going to be a step down process as this goes into off the chart territory beyond a -5 deviation by the middle of the month. So that's plenty of Arctic air coming in on the backside after you get past this system on Tuesday, Wednesday. As this comes across, all that colder air gets a little bit colder and colder, and then by next weekend a good chunk of the country is going to be experiencing that colder air, and that EPO stays negative all the way to Christmas, folks. So yes, I am expecting an extended cold spell coming after we get past this severe threat. So as we go into Friday, that low pressure center will be off the coast of the northeast, and that'll be ringing in some very heavy snow just to the northwest of that I-95 corridor. Heavier snows should start breaking out into portions of Massachusetts, but especially into Vermont and New Hampshire. Yeah, we're talking possibly up to a foot of snow in those areas. And just into upstate New York, getting some healthy, decent totals out of this deal. And I think as we continue to expand and head into Friday night, then we're talking Maine. All these areas into portions of Maine will be getting those beneficial snows, and probably your biggest snows of the season, as this all wraps around, and plenty of cold air, like I showed you, drains on the backside. So let's look at some of these kind of preliminary snow amounts. I showed you some of these amounts out west. You're going to be adding to these totals. So this is a pretty good, decent snowpack for about over a 7-day time span, with the most significant snows really taking shape into portions of Nebraska, but especially the Dakotas into Minnesota. We're talking a foot to possibly 2 feet in a lot of these areas as it swings across the upper Great Lakes up through Wisconsin and to Michigan, and another pretty significant pocket into upstate New York, into Vermont and New Hampshire, with another easily a foot totals in a lot of these places heading into Maine. And that's just between now and next weekend. If you take a look at the Canadian guidance, yeah, we're starting to look at global guidance starting to come together of all these significant snow amounts. I mean, some of these isolated amounts could pick up over 2 feet. I was seeing some of 27, if not 30 inches in some of these areas in the Dakotas. Yeah, you're going to be measuring this stuff in feet, and a lot of this is going to be blizzard. So I'm expecting blizzard conditions, blizzard warnings in some of these areas as we get closer to this event, but definitely some significant totals. So what gets interesting on the backside as we got that Arctic air, so as we go through the 14th and through the 19th of December, plenty of cold air drains in from the west, getting all the way down into the deep south, a good part of Oklahoma and Texas, much of these areas that are experiencing, that will experience the severe weather. It all ends with much colder air, and even Florida gets into this deal. So it goes all the way into Florida. They're not going to get missed out. And if we take it a step further, heading towards Christmas Eve, yeah, you'd be your 19th through the 24th time frame. That's a lot of cold air, folks. So it's not going to be warm for Christmas for a good chunk of the country. I can promise you that, because there's plenty of colder air with that blocking really starting to take shape over the top. That locks in the cold air underneath for an extended period of time. And if we lay a snowpack down, that just lays the groundwork for the next week to pull that snow line further south. And you can actually see this from the latest Climate Prediction Center saying, hey, once we lay the groundwork with the first week of next week of all that snowfall to the north, that just naturally has to go over that snowpack, which would add another 10 degrees lower. So to the temperatures once these systems head further south. So then all this could be in the form of snow and not rain. So we're talking potentially for heavy snows from that 16th to the 22nd time frame into Kansas, a good part of Oklahoma and Arkansas, and yes, even the Texas Panhandle, and yes, it could swing as far south as portions of North Texas. Heavy snow relates to possibly up to 4 inches in some of these areas along into the Four Corners region. So it definitely gets interesting for a good chunk of the country as we go into the second half of December. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Be sure to like this video. Be sure to follow me on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. I definitely update those on a regular basis, and definitely catch me in the next update where I protect you before and after the storm.